Life has a way of knocking us down, of throwing storms, battles, and trials into our path. Yet the true measure of a person is not simply whether they win once, but whether they return after defeat, after loss, after heartbreak, and still walk back into the arena of life as a victor. The story of the one who rises again carries more weight than the one who never fell. Because when the victor returns, they don't just come back with strength. They come back with scars that testify, wisdom that guides, and courage that cannot be broken. Victory is never the product of ease, nor is it found in the comfort of quiet seasons. Real victory is born in the midst of struggle, when the weight of life presses down so heavily that it seems impossible to stand. It is in those moments, when the body is weary, when the mind is clouded, and when the heart feels broken, that something greater is forged. Just as gold is purified in fire, so too is true strength and character refined in the furnace of adversity. Without resistance, there is no growth. Without a storm, there is no need for an anchor. It is the difficulty of the journey that shapes the greatness of the victor who returns. When life places you in a struggle, it is not to break you, but to shape you. Comfort zones never created champions. A tree planted in a greenhouse may look beautiful, but it cannot withstand the winds of the wild. Likewise, a life without struggle produces fragile victories that fade when storms arrive. But the individual who has fought battles in the dark, who has cried through nights of uncertainty, and who has wrestled with disappointment, emerges with a strength that cannot be shaken. The victory that is born from such struggle carries a depth that no shallow wind could ever provide. This is why victors who return are not the same as they were before. They return not only with the trophy of triumph, but with the wisdom of endurance. Their scars tell a story that makes the victory even more valuable. The struggle taught them patience, resilience, humility, and courage. And when they stand again on the field of life, they are not standing as someone untouched by pain, but as someone transformed by it. Think of a runner preparing for a marathon. If they trained only on flat, smooth ground, they might build some endurance, but they would not be ready for the uphill climbs and rough terrain that the real race demands. It is the grueling runs in the rain, the uphill sprints when their legs are burning, and the practice sessions when exhaustion tempts them to quit that prepare them for victory on race day. The victory is not won at the finish line. It is won in the hidden hours of struggle before the crowd ever cheers. An excellent example of this can be seen in the story of Nelson Mandela. For 27 years he was imprisoned, separated from his family, and subjected to conditions designed to break his spirit. Yet it was within that prison cell, in the furnace of unimaginable struggle, that his resolve was forged. By the time he walked free, he was not only a man who survived, he was a victor prepared to lead a divided nation into freedom. His victory was not born the day he became president. It was born in the nights of suffering, when he refused to surrender his vision. His return to leadership carried the weight of that struggle, and because of it, his victory became a light for millions. In the same way, whatever struggle we face today is not a sign of weakness, but of preparation. The challenges are not barriers. They are building blocks. Struggle forces us to dig deeper, to find strength we did not know existed, and to lean on faith that transcends fear. And when we emerge from it, the victory we carry will be sweeter, stronger, and more enduring because it was born not in ease, but in the midst of struggle. Falling is one of the most misunderstood parts of life's journey. Too often, people treat a fall as the end, as if stumbling along the way disqualifies them from reaching the destination. But the truth is, falling is not failing. To fall is to experience the weight of human limitation, to face a setback, to confront weakness. But failure only happens when you refuse to rise again. Falling is a temporary state, not a permanent identity. It is an event, not a destiny. Every person who has ever achieved greatness has faced moments where life brought them low. What separates victors from those who never rise is the realization that falling is simply the setup for a greater comeback. When you stumble, you learn lessons you would never grasp while standing tall. The ground may be hard, and the pain may sting, but it teaches humility, resilience, and clarity. It strips away pride and replaces it with perspective. It reminds us that strength is not in never being knocked down, but in choosing to rise, no matter how many times it happens. Falling gives you the chance to evaluate where you went wrong, to adjust your course, and to step forward wiser than before. Without those falls, victories would be shallow and character undeveloped. Think of a child learning to walk. The first steps are wobbly, uncertain, and fragile. Again and again, the child falls to the ground, yet no one would call that child a failure. Instead, we recognize that each fall is part of the process of gaining balance, strength, and confidence. Eventually, those same falls become the foundation of steady strides. The same is true for us. Falling in life is not a verdict against us. It is the training ground for growth. One of the most powerful examples of this truth can be seen in the story of Thomas Edison. History tells us that when he was working to invent the electric light bulb, he failed thousands of times in his experiments. At one point, a reporter asked him how it felt to fail so many times. Edison responded that he had not failed. He had simply discovered thousands of ways that did not work. Each fall in his process was not failure, but progress. And because he refused to equate falling with failing, he eventually succeeded in creating one of the most revolutionary inventions in history. The world still benefits from his persistence today. In our own lives, we must embrace the same perspective. Perhaps you attempted a business that collapsed, or a relationship that fell apart, or a dream that seemed to die. Falling in those areas may have left you bruised, embarrassed, or discouraged. But those falls do not mean you are a failure. They are opportunities to rise stronger, to rebuild on firmer foundations, and to discover new paths you never would have considered otherwise. What matters is not that you fell, but that you refuse to stay down. The victor who returns understands this deeply. They do not deny the fall, nor do they cover up the scars. Instead, they use them as proof that falling was not the end of their story. They rise with fresh determination, declaring with their very life that defeat is never final. Falling is simply part of the process, and the one who chooses to get up every time will ultimately stand as the victor. Perspective is one of the greatest treasures a victor carries when they return. Before the struggle, the battlefield may have seemed like a place of destruction, loss, and wasted effort. Every setback might have looked like failure, and every hardship like a punishment. But once a person has gone through the valley and risen again, their vision changes. They no longer see life only through the lens of pain. They see it through the wisdom that pain has given them. Perspective turns wounds into lessons and struggles into stepping stones. The returning victor carries a new set of eyes. And with those eyes, they see opportunity where they once saw only obstacles. Perspective is powerful because it reshapes meaning. The very same situation that once looked like a dead end now looks like preparation. What appeared to be rejection can be seen as redirection. What once seemed like a season of loss can be understood as a season of pruning, making way for new growth. When the victor returns, they are not naive or blind to difficulty. Rather, they recognize that even the darkest moments were working toward their growth. They understand that battles are not just fought to be survived. They are endured to bring wisdom, clarity, and strength that could not have been gained any other way. The truth is, perspective allows a person to carry peace into situations where they once carried panic. Before, the battlefield may have been overwhelming, but now they can step onto it with calm assurance. They understand that storms don't last forever, that setbacks don't erase destiny, and that every scar has a story to tell. This new way of seeing life empowers them not to fear challenges, but to face them with courage, knowing they are not the same person they once were. A powerful example of this truth can be seen in the story of Joseph from the Scriptures. As a young man, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. For years, it seemed as if his life was nothing but loss and disappointment. To the eyes of his younger self, it must have looked like a graveyard of dreams. Yet, when he rose to a position of influence in Egypt and was later reunited with his brothers, his words showed the perspective he had gained. He told them, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." His perspective transformed years of betrayal and hardship into a training ground for destiny. The pain had not been wasted. It had been shaping him for leadership. That perspective not only gave him peace about his past, but allowed him to extend forgiveness and walk in wisdom that shaped a nation. In our own lives, perspective works in the same way. Perhaps you've gone through seasons that felt like destruction, loss of a job, broken relationships, or doors that closed in your face. At the time, it may have seemed unbearable, even pointless. But when you rise and return with fresh eyes, you can look back and see that those very moments equipped you for where you stand today. You may discover that the closed door saved you from disaster, or the painful season taught you endurance, or the delay prepared you for a greater opportunity. Perspective allows you to interpret your story, not as a chain of failures, but as a carefully woven journey toward purpose. The victor who returns with perspective is a different kind of leader, a different kind of fighter, and a different kind of dreamer. They no longer walk in fear of the battlefield because they know the value hidden in the struggle. With perspective, they carry not only the victory itself, but also the wisdom to use it well, to inspire others, and to walk into the future with confidence. Would you like me to also expand the fourth key point? Courage grows in the return into 600 words with an example in the same style. You said, key point 40, courage grows in the return. It takes courage to show up again after disappointment. Anyone can fight when they're fresh, but it takes a different kind of strength to return after wounds, doubts, and scars. The returning victor declares with their life, I may have been hit, but I am not finished. Explain this key point in 600 words without headings, and please add a short. Excellent example to illustrate this point. ChatGPT said courage is not proven when everything is easy, when energy is high, and when success seems guaranteed. True courage is revealed in the decision to return after defeat, to step back into the arena after pain, and to believe again after disappointment has broken the heart. Anyone can fight at the beginning of the journey when excitement fuels them, but it takes a deeper, unshakable strength to rise after the wounds, to move forward with scars still visible, and to declare, I may have been hit, but I am not finished. The courage that grows in the return is a courage born not from hype or enthusiasm, but from resilience and determination. When you have tasted failure, when you have been laughed at, when you have been betrayed, or when you have experienced loss, the easy option is to step aside and say, never again. The weight of discouragement whispers that you're done. But courage is the quiet voice that says, try again. It is the decision to face the same battlefield that once knocked you down, not because you feel invincible, but because you know your purpose is greater than your pain. Courage in the return is different from the courage you had at the start. At the beginning, you fight with passion. In the return, you fight with resolve. At the beginning, you fight with energy. In the return, you fight with wisdom. Courage grows in the return because you know the cost. You know what it feels like to hurt. You know what it feels like to fail. And yet, instead of being paralyzed by fear, you let that knowledge sharpen your will to press forward. A soldier who returns to battle after being wounded is far braver than the one who has never been touched by war. In the same way, the person who dares to try again after heartbreak, after rejection, after disappointment, is demonstrating a courage deeper than words can express. One excellent example of this is the story of Malala Yousafzai. As a young girl advocating for education, she was targeted and attacked in an attempt to silence her voice forever. She was wounded physically in a way that could have easily ended her mission and buried her courage. But after recovery, she chose to return, not just to her own education, but to the global stage, speaking louder than ever for the rights of children around the world. Her courage did not come from never facing fear. It came from returning in spite of fear. Her scars became the very evidence of her resilience. That kind of courage inspires millions because it shows that true strength is not the absence of pain, but the decision to keep moving despite it. We all face moments that test us in the same way. Maybe it is the loss of a dream, the collapse of a plan, or the betrayal of someone we trusted. Those moments tempt us to shrink back, to protect ourselves from ever feeling that pain again. But courage calls us to return. It calls us to step back into the arena of life with all our wounds, knowing that we are not the same as before. We are stronger, wiser, and braver. And every step we take after the fall proves that we are not defined by what happened to us, but by how we chose to rise again. The victor who returns embodies this truth. Their courage is not a loud shout, but a steady march. It is the refusal to quit, the boldness to face familiar battles, and the faith to believe that what lies ahead is greater than what lies behind. And in returning, their courage grows, not only for themselves, but for everyone who watches and learns that scars are not the end of the story, but the mark of someone who dared to rise again. When a victor returns after struggle, their comeback does more than change their own life. It becomes a source of inspiration for others. Human beings are deeply moved by examples of resilience. When we see someone rise from the ashes of defeat, it reminds us that we too can rise. A return is never only about one person's triumph. It becomes a testimony that speaks to countless others still trapped in the valley of despair. In this way, the return carries a power far beyond personal victory. It ignites hope and faith in those who are watching. Many people live quietly in the shadows of discouragement. They are weighed down by mistakes, losses, and fears, often convinced that their best days are behind them. Words alone may not move them, But the sight of someone who refused to quit, someone who was knocked down but rose again, becomes undeniable proof that a comeback is possible. The story of one returning victor breathes courage into tired souls, letting them know that they too can get back up. This is why victories gained after setbacks are so significant. They are not just private accomplishments. They are public demonstrations that failure is not final. The scars of the returning victor carry messages stronger than speeches. A scar says, "I have been through pain, but I am still standing." That testimony encourages others not to surrender to their wounds. It reassures them that brokenness is not the end of the road, but often the beginning of a greater journey. The inspiration of a victor's return also has a multiplying effect. One person's resilience can spark a chain reaction. When a leader comes back stronger after trials, it motivates their family, community, or even a nation. Their story becomes a light guiding others through darkness. Inspiration is contagious. It spreads far beyond the initial victory. And its impact cannot always be measured in the moment. Generations may benefit from the courage of one returning victor. A powerful example of this can be seen in the life of Bethany Hamilton, the professional surfer who lost her arm in a shark attack at just 13 years old. Many thought her dream of surfing was over, that such a tragedy would define her life with limitations. But instead of giving up, Bethany returned to the waves. She trained tirelessly, adapted to new methods, and eventually went on to win competitions at the highest level. Her return did not just prove her personal resilience. It inspired millions around the world. People who had lost hope, who were struggling with their own challenges, saw in her story a reason to keep going. Her testimony reached beyond surfing. It touched lives in hospitals, schools, and families who needed to see that comebacks are possible. In the same way, our returns have the power to inspire those around us. Even if we think our story is small, someone is watching. A child may be watching how their parent rises after losing a job. A friend may be observing how we handle heartbreak. A colleague may notice how we recover after failure. Our return can become the spark that pushes someone else to rise in their own struggle. The victor's return becomes a living sermon that says, "If I can get back up, so can you." This is why it matters not only that we rise, but how we rise. Rising with faith, humility, and determination multiplies the impact. People are not just encouraged by the fact that we returned. They are moved by the strength and grace we display in the process. The return becomes bigger than us. It becomes a gift of hope for others. The victor who returns does not walk alone. With every step forward, they carry countless hearts with them. Their story shines a light into dark places, proving that no valley is too deep, no failure too final, and no wound too permanent to stop someone from rising again. And in inspiring others, their victory grows far beyond themselves. It becomes a legacy of hope. When a victor returns, the purpose is never simply to prove doubters wrong or to relive the past. The deeper reason for the return is to finish the assignment that was left incomplete. Every person carries within them a calling, a responsibility, or a purpose that is bigger than themselves. Life's struggles and setbacks may interrupt the journey, but they do not cancel the assignment. When the victor rises again, they are not coming back for applause, nor to prove their strength alone. They are coming back to fulfill what they were created to do. Unfinished business has a way of calling to us. A vision left unfulfilled, a mission left incomplete, or a goal abandoned in the storm will never allow the heart to rest. This is why returning is so powerful. It is not just about showing resilience. It is about obedience to the greater purpose. The victor knows that their life has meaning, that their gifts are not accidents, and that their story was not meant to end in defeat. The return is an act of faith that says, I will not leave my purpose undone. Coming back to finish the assignment requires a different kind of strength than simply starting. Anyone can start with excitement, but the one who returns comes with scars, wisdom, and maturity. They no longer chase empty recognition. They focus on destiny. The assignment becomes clearer in the return because the storms have stripped away distractions. What remains is the core purpose, the reason they were born. That is what fuels the victor to step forward again, determined not to quit until the mission is complete. The beauty of finishing the assignment is that it gives meaning to every past struggle. The nights of weeping, the seasons of delay, the weight of disappointment, all of it becomes worthwhile when the victor realizes it was preparing them to fulfill their calling. What once looked like wasted years now looks like training. What once felt like rejection now appears as redirection. The return transforms past pain into purposeful preparation for the assignment ahead. A remarkable example of this can be seen in the life of Nelson Mandela. After spending 27 years in prison, he could have chosen to step away from public life and live quietly with his family. No one would have blamed him for retreating into peace after so much suffering. Yet Mandela knew his assignment was not finished. His nation still needed healing, justice, and unity. So when he walked free, he did not come back merely to reclaim lost years. He came back to finish what he was born to do. His leadership not only dismantled apartheid, but also laid the foundation for reconciliation in South Africa. His return was not about revenge or proving personal strength. It was about fulfilling a calling larger than himself. In our own lives, the principle remains the same. Perhaps you started something years ago, a dream, a business, a calling, or even a personal goal, and life interrupted it with hardship. The temptation may be to walk away permanently, but unfinished purpose will always whisper to your spirit, The victor's return is the answer to that whisper. It is the decision to stand again, to press forward, and to complete what was entrusted to you. And when you finally finish the assignment, you will look back and see that every delay, every setback, and every fall was shaping you for this very moment. The return to finish the assignment is not just about personal satisfaction. It impacts others as well. A completed mission blesses families, communities, and sometimes even generations. The victor's return ensures that the story does not end in the middle, but reaches its God-ordained conclusion. And in finishing the assignment, the victor leaves behind a legacy that will outlive them. The story of the victor who returns is the story of us all. We may stumble, we may struggle, we may even be counted out. But when we rise again, when we return with renewed strength, with deeper faith, and with unstoppable courage, we declare to the world that no setback can cancel our destiny. So rise up, return to the fight, and let your scars sing the song of a comeback greater than your setback. For the victor who returns does not return empty-handed. They return crowned with wisdom, with strength, and with victory that can never be taken away.